Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Weekly Review. I'm your host, Paul Hazard, and with me this morning, jumping all around the screen here, is Lucy Newberger, Leanne Lax, and John Gibbs. You're all very welcome. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
It's been a very busy... Oh, I think, we do have a delay on the line, but that's okay. I'll try and account for that. It's been a busy week in education as ever. Oracy is back in the news, and it demands that it becomes the fourth R. If you don't know what that means, we'll explain that all to you shortly. And a brace of Ofsted reports really scorch early years and primary education, particularly teachers in teaching and learning. But fear not, we will not be getting our culottes in a twist whatsoever, and we will be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. John Catt have an exceptional collection of book titles that cover a range of educational topics, ideas and research. The books are aimed at forward-thinking schools and support best practice teaching for both primary and secondary education. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
Introducing Reading Solutions UK, home to Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development programme, improving outcomes for students and schools nationwide. Create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, using Reading Plus's evidence-based adaptive technology. Reading Plus accurately assesses your students' skills gaps and places them on a personalised learning pathway, built to accelerate their strengths and improve on their areas for development. You can try the programme with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot today.
Welcome back, everybody. One of the stories that caught my eye this week was a report produced by the Oracy Education Commission, snappily entitled, "We Need to Talk." Now, it calls for a renewed focus on Oracy in schools. John, if I could come to you first. My view, Oracy is vital. I mean, children learn to talk. It's their voice, it's their agency, it's their expression, it's our emotions. I mean, it's a massive part of, how we communicate who we are. Could you just enlighten our listeners? What is Oracy? What's its importance? And tell us what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. If you take a sort of historical perspective, first a short historical perspective, 2001, the National Literacy Trust started a campaign called Talk to Your Baby. Just talk to your baby. It's very easy. When they're babbling and such like, talk to them. Have them in pushchairs that face you, not outwards. Talk to them when you're in the supermarket. Talking is the gateway intellectual activity. Everything else depends on that. I used to say to my students, if you can say it, you probably understand it. So if you can explain it to me, then you get it, you understand it. If you try and say, because we're doing that thing where you read something and you forget, get to the end of the paragraph and you've been thinking of something else. I don't know what I just read. Similarly, when you can sit in a class, you can sit in a lecture, you can read a book and you think you get it. Oh yeah, I've got that now. You tick that box, you make the notes, you got it. But if you can say it, then you probably do understand it. The historical perspective I was talking about was, go back 2,000 years and you've got Greek philosophers like Socrates who didn't believe in writing anything down because speak it, say it, speak it. Speaking is the primary source of understanding and it's the most pure and dynamic of activities. So speak.
There's a slight criticism, John, in that the curriculum as it is at the minute maybe downgrades Oracy in favour of, reading and writing and so on. Would that be true?
Yes. I pitched it. Yes. Yes, absolutely. It completely, unfortunately, downgrades a lot of things we're going to talk about today, which I think we're sort of rediscovering. Well, not rediscovering, what teachers have always known it, as we should get on to. But the ability to speak has been pushed aside by so much of the mechanisms which can be measured. It's harder to measure being articulate. It's harder to measure oracy. It's harder to do that. So it's easier to get things in books and write them down. And also you feel as a teacher you should be, a page well filled by a student is work done, numbers collected, things ticked, boxes ticked. We've pushed aside oracy, unfortunately, I think. Speak more, play more, as we shall say in this rest of this.
And hopefully our it should be valued more. We've all taught children who are great orally, but maybe not so good when it comes to writing on paper. But, that's a skill that they have and it should be appreciated. Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
Leanne, given what we've just said there, how do schools improve oracy?
I think I just wanted to add on to something John said. He said, if you can say it, you can explain it. And I think from a primary perspective, if you can say it, you can write it. And you should say it before you write it. We're very big on let's train teachers, but we all know how to talk. We know how to put words together. So I'm not sure that you need training. I think that schools and unfortunately Ofsted need to put more emphasis on it. I think especially in the past, there's been a lot of pressure on teachers to put evidence in a book. Obviously, if you are doing talk or drama in an English lesson, there really is no evidence in a book, apart from maybe a photo. That was maybe not good enough in recent years, or teachers were concerned that they didn't write in an English lesson. I know for my class, and we do talk for writing, which is massive on talking and on oracy. I think maybe the term oracy is new to education, but I don't think it's a new skill to teach children. I think we've always had to teach talking before writing, and then again reading. Where I think it's reading, talking, writing. Read the vocabulary from, and then once you have the vocabulary, if you don't say it, you won't remember it, and if you don't say it in a sentence, you're not going to be able to write it in a sentence. So I think it is all connected, and I think the powers that be need to put more importance on it, and then maybe teachers will feel more empowered to use it in their teaching.
Yeah.
Lucy, just to kind of move slightly on a tangent here, and maybe connected, Eton pronounced this week that state schools should do more to improve public speaking for their pupils. And what they really should do is set up debating societies. Is there a divide in terms of public speaking between state schools and schools?
Yes, is the short answer to this. I think
we're all great on these short answers this morning. I love these really definitive short answers.
I think when you look at a lot of the people who have a sort of a proclivity for speaking, they are often politicians who have been to these private schools. And so those are often held up as your examples of people who are good orators or who are good public speakers. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there are other people who have not been to these schools who, of course, articulate beautifully, but they are less visible. And so I think it's very easy for schools like Eton to sort of dictate and sort of say, oh, well, state schools should be doing this. Well, what are you doing? And if you want this to happen, then why not invite this? Why not embrace this? Why not, instead of sort of being hauled up on your little hill in, I think it's Windsor or wherever you are, I'm not entirely sure, then open this out. And also, instead of kind of treating it as sort of an outreach thing? Why not treat it as more of kind of bringing people together and actually reducing that snobbery? Because I think often Oracy as well has this this sort of element attached to it where it's, the idea of articulating beautifully is almost a privilege. And instead of that, it needs to be something that is inclusive and is seen for everybody. The ability to be able to, whether it's stand up in a room as a teacher and deliver a lesson, whether it is you want to go into politics, whoever you are, and deliver those speeches, or whether it is just being able to assert yourself amongst your peers, that should absolutely be for everyone.
I think, sorry, John.
Go ahead, Leanne.
I strongly believe that Oracy is like public speaking is just a branch of Oracy.
Yeah.
They've gone that way because it's the extreme way with private schools, but it's not the only part of Oracy. Oracy is for the benefit of the individual child so they can explain themselves, even just to themselves or to a friend. I don't think it's about being able to stand up and speak in front of a group of children, because not everybody will want to do that. So the skill has to be taught for different reasons, and public speaking is not the only piece of Oracy, I think.
Great point, Leanne. Yeah. John, you were going to say something, yeah?
I was going to say, the thing I was about to say, I'm just going to quickly endorse what Leanne just said there, is that it's a personal psychological thing as well. It's about your own identity. If you can express yourself to yourself and to your friends. The point I was going to make, then I think you're a more fulfilled human being. But the point I was going to make was that I ran the debating society for years at school, and we were great. We won all sorts of local competitions. I was very proud of it. And then one time I thought, we're ready. We can enter one of the big national debating competitions, one of the esteemed ones. And we came up against a private school. Well, it was like, they just mashed us completely. Our kids were good, I thought, but these kids were superbly poised and confident, almost to the point of suave. It was just ridiculously able to do this speaking, and it can carry you a long way. I mean, the ability to talk can mask an awful lot of the ability to be confident and talk can mask an awful lot of lack of ability. Boris Johnson's a perfect example.
You said so much there, John.
Well, before
in trouble.
Yeah. John has annoyed the PE set out there, and before he annoys some others, maybe we should move on. But interestingly, one of our regular listeners, JBL, says he taught in inner city comprehensives for years, and the best students in those schools are as good as anyone given the chance. And I think our panelists would agree. And maybe it is just, the setting, the circumstance, and the situation that's very different. And I take Leanne's point that Oracy is very much about thinking for yourself and organizing your thoughts, your feelings, your wishes, your wants, and desires, and then having the ability to say that outwardly to other people, to be understood, to have agency, and to have a sense of autonomy and power in the world. Excuse me. Christopher Bowles, one of our fellow hosts, says, what would deliver the greatest social benefit most quickly would be discussion training rather than competitive debating. High-level political action involves discussion in which both sides win. Super point, Chris, and that might fit in with our third topic, which we'll come to shortly, but we need to move on to our next news story now. Now, two heavyweight reports from Ofsted were issued this week. The first, Best Start in Life Part 3, the 4 specific areas of learning. And the second, Strong Foundations in the First Years of School, strongly criticise teachers, teaching, and what happens in early years. Now, I was lucky enough to speak to early years expert Ruth Swales this week, and she and her colleagues are absolutely outraged. Now, some of the criticisms, and I'm going to come to you shortly, Lucy, but some of the criticisms include teaching methods do not help children to learn and remember important knowledge. That knowledge, by the way, if you listen to the beginning, includes words like culottes and chinos, 2 foreign words, I think, as well. Pupils' learning is left to chance. I mean, what a criticism, you know, the ineffective use of play-based learning. Can early years and you know, primary school teaching, can it be as bad as this report suggests, Lucy?
I mean, I am a primary teacher, and of course I'm going to come to the defense of my colleagues wherever they are. No, I think that you've also got to bear in mind, and Leanne and I were actually talking about this just before we came on air, that certainly when it comes to early years, there is a framework in place. And we were talking about the emphasis on the fact that it is a framework with sort of, at best, a kind of, I'm reticent to even call it a guide. It's sort of casually suggestive at best. And then when you also move on to a primary curriculum, which is so outdated at this point, and I mean, someone is going to have to rein me in, and is not fit for purpose, and is large aspects of it are irrelevant. There are, of course, aspects of it that will always remain relevant, but you are criticizing based on something that is outdated, is certainly from a primary point of view, from an EYFS point of view, you're criticizing on something that, I mean, these teachers do not need to have their hands held and be told exactly what to do. They are doing their absolute damnedest with what they have, bearing in mind that schools in general are experiencing enormous budget cuts, etc., all the rest of it, overcrowded classes, sickness of staff and of pupils as well. You add in all these factors and you are criticizing unfairly. Would be my sort of measured as I can with all of this.
I would have thought so, yes. I mean, on all the years I've been teaching, I've never met teachers who marginalize and ignore pupils and give less time to the most needy. In fact, quite the reverse. I often think teachers take on children who, you know, maybe are behind, or, you know, they're and they really put additional and extra effort into them.
The EYFS teachers are, I mean, there are many who are in primary who will say to you, as will I, because I am not an early years expert, they are the best in the business. They are the people. They are the building blocks of the rest of you.
Yeah.
You know, what they do is what the rest of us in teaching then build upon. So you cannot sit here and tell me that they are the ones who are failing, because it's simply not true.
Yeah. One of the other criticisms, bearing in mind these reports are from the Department for Education, one of the criticisms, John, is a fear over Ofsted's increasing role. Now, we might know about that, we might be familiar with that, but the tone of the report is very much an insult to teachers. I think Lucy has alluded to that. And I mean, in spite of, the big listen, and we've had the alternative big listen, is anybody listening, or Ofsted listening? This tone, this report in its tone and its criticisms, it must be poor for morale and standards.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely. As Lucy said, the tone of it is unfair. It's because it doesn't take into account the context. And it's easy to criticize teachers because that's what you see. They're the front. That's what's happening in the classroom in front of you. And without taking into account the context of class sizes, are ridiculously outdated curriculums, overloaded with things, with obsessions with data, with a framework of management in a lot of schools, which doesn't allow teachers to be teachers, and so on. All those things. So when you look at it in a classroom, you have a large class, and you're failing to take into account this. It's tremendously unfair. And it's not the first time. We're accusing Ofsted here of being crass and callous. Really? Who knew? Anyway, yeah. Really, where? Obviously,
doing this
because they're an easy target, teachers. When the real difficult target, the thing you need to be talking about, is changing our attitudes to education. and where it starts, absolutely, in the early years. I mean, they said some hopeful things, and I picked up things like, they need to be creative in those early years, stories, rhymes, play, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But you've got to allow teachers to do it, and they're not allowing them to do it right now.
Yeah. They are the people who know their children best, teachers, yes. And they largely should be left within the framework, which, I do think needs changed. They should be largely left to manage their classes. Leanne, this is not only kind of an inspection report, but it's a gathering of information and knowledge. It also includes, the reading of and the information and guidance from a significant number of researchers and experts and so on. Since the report's release on Tuesday, a number of these experts have come out and said, hold on a minute, you're misquoting me, you're misinterpreting what I've said. Even super TTR fan Michael Rosen has come out and said, you're misquoting me. I mean, now, in a conversation I had with a couple of experts through the week, they did suggest these reports might have been written by AI. I don't know if that is.
AI is more sensitive.
Right, indeed, John.
More humane.
It might have more compassion, indeed, yeah. But look, when experts are then coming out and saying, hold on, that's not what I'm saying, surely that destroys the credibility of the report and Ofsted, indeed.
I mean, the report, first of all, says Ofsted says. It's the first issue. Mm-hmm. I also, we spoke about, do you need to train teachers to teach Oracy? Do you need to train teachers to teach how to talk? Not really, but the report does mention play, and play-based learning is always something that comes up with early years. Do you do it correctly? A lot of Ofsted inspectors who maybe don't have early years experience would come in and just see play. However, on the flip side, it is something that you can plan. Executing it is something different. And there is a skill within executing play-based learning. And a lot of the times, the teachers or even like the assistants that are in these areas don't have that training. And I do think it's something that especially assistants in early years do need training in that, because that's where you bring out language and all those PSHE skills. And I mean, like Lucy said, life skills are taught in the early years, and this isn't something you can just write on a lesson plan. You have to be able to look out for these things within an early years classroom. And I think if you don't have the training, you're not really going to see it. So I think on the flip side of that report, there is something within that of how to teach play or how to spot play that is learning based.
I also think Ofsted have kind of shown themselves up a little bit here in how they've almost kind of dug their own hole. In listening to what Leanne said just then, by showing a complete lack of understanding what really goes on, you've just gone, you've almost kind of been caught with sort of no understanding of what you are talking about, because who was consulted in this, who was asked, who was kind of, and wasn't the report based on something like 20 schools, or did I imagine
it was a short cohort, a small cohort? It was, yeah.
I rest my case.
There are many early years play-based learning advocates that would not have said these kinds of things. I think the lady you interviewed, is it Liz Swales? Is that her name?
Ruth.
Ruth, yes.
Ruth, Alistair Price Collect, they're all advocates for play-based learning, and I wonder if they would have said these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. John, go ahead, Jack.
I'll quickly add, again, endorse Leanne there, play-based learning for anyone who's not a teacher might sound like, well, but playing around, and that's not play, is it? It's not a proper education. Play-based learning is so difficult to get right. In my brief experience when I was teacher training, going into an early years classroom, and I thought, never again. I can't do this. It's so difficult. It requires so much thought.
I would agree with you on that too. Anyway, that's all we have time on that story this week. Now, it's Young Musician of the Year time again. And I remember as children, you know, of course, we only had 4 channels in those days, maybe only started off with 2 channels. It used to be a big deal on television. Everybody gathered around and watched it. This year, the Young Musician of the Year is being used to highlight the stark contrast between state provision of music and, again, private schools having a very different kind of outlook on the teaching of music, because the finalists are, well, none of the finalists are from state schools. Leanne, maybe just before we get to that debate, the article opens with the question, are classical musical competitions a good thing? Do you think they are?
Yeah, I think they are, definitely. Brings classical music to the forefront of education. I guess the problem and the link between the competition participants and private schooling is that instruments are expensive, and private music lessons are expensive, unless you're doing, I guess, the recorder in school, which many primary schools do. A classical instrument is expensive, so I guess that's part of the issue. But I do think the competitions are a good thing. I think you need more heads making time, space, and money for it, maybe, and that might make a difference. We get a lot of, especially after the Olympics, Olympians came into schools and gave assemblies. Well, let's get classical musicians into school giving concerts.
Yeah, that would be good, yeah, wouldn't it? Yeah. Lucy, is it not embarrassing that it takes an elite competition to point out that there's a stark contrast between what school you go to and what music provision you're going to experience?
Of course, but this is kind of the similar thing we were talking about with the Oracy debate as well. I mean, this again comes down to arts being squashed out of our curriculum as well, and certainly, you know, perhaps a lack of specialist teachers as well, or teachers who do, or people who do specialize in music wanting to enter the profession. So, you know, it's all compounded by these difficulties that we have. Add into that price of musical instruments, add into that, you know, just curriculum time as well. It becomes a difficult thing, and it becomes one of those things that is sacrificed, which is a real shame, when actually it's so enriching, it's so important. There have been many benefits that we have learned about, talked about when it comes to classical music, the discipline of learning an instrument, etc. And so I do think it is sad that it takes elite competition to kind of bring this to the forefront, and it shouldn't be seen as this kind of elite thing. It should be inclusive. It should be available for all. But of course, we have so many roadblocks in place at the moment that prevent this from happening, from being a reality.
Yeah. And following on from that, John, the government has said they are promising to bring meaningful musical opportunities to every child in Britain. How are they doing, and what do they need to do?
Well, what they need to do is something I used to see. I mean, I don't know how common it was. I think it was quite common. Was when I lived in Milton Keynes, big new town, and taught at a big, huge comprehensive school, 2,500 students. And I'd go in on a Saturday morning, as teachers do sometimes, to potter into your office. Yeah, you potter in there and you think, surely the school is going to be deserted, and it would be full of the Milton Keynes music service. You used to on a Saturday morning, all the classrooms, I'd see them in there. Pianos, I thought, well, that's why there was pianos. That's why every classroom had seemed to have a piano in it. Anyway, the pianos were going, and there was a cacophony, and there was a youth orchestra going. Over the years that I was at that school, the Milton Keynes music service went from this vibrant hub of activity, increasingly diminished, purely for financial cuts, because they had most of the funding came from the local authority. So it moved from being something that was healthy and widespread and took lots of students. Not only that, I was a parent, endured many years of my daughters soaring away at the violin, which is a love knows no bounds when you can endure your children soaring away at the violin for years on end. It's a true test of familial commitment. But But also, as the years went by, they didn't become concert violinists, but they were able to think and logically express themselves in all sorts of ways, which I put down to that years of exercise. So there are benefits to music way beyond simply becoming a musician.
Oh, John, you're going to be in such trouble. Definitely.
By the way, John, I screeched on a violin as well. My parents will admit to that.
Yeah, there's at least there are many years where it doesn't sound like anything except, well, something semi-industrial.
A form of torture.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
But then magically, it's when that moment when it sounds good. Oh yeah. My goodness.
Yeah. And of course, we all love music. And as JBL tells us, you know, what effect would it have on the economy if we weren't a nation of music lovers? Absolutely. There may be only one Taylor Swift, but there are millions of fans. Never neglect that. And I mean, our musical history, you know, both classical and to be fair now, the article does pay tribute, you know, to the British heritage of music. But also, you know, in terms of pop music and all sorts of things, you know, Britain's heritage is absolutely magnificent. Okay, that's all we have time for on that article this morning. Now, on to our shows of the week. Lucy, what have you been listening to?
So I've been listening to Education Tonight with Brent and Adam, who are always up for a great chat. And this week they had Steve Bladden or Bladen, I'm not quite sure which one it is. I think it's Bladden, who was talking about the legacy of COVID in schools. It's something that I have repeatedly brought up in things, because I do believe it's something that's not discussed as readily as perhaps it should be, and kind of almost less about now in terms of the kind of academic side of things, although that is still prevalent, but more the kind of health impact. And he is someone who is suffering from long COVID, who's no longer working in schools. And he's talking about the impact of sickness in the wake of this, you know, the fact that COVID is still kind of amongst us. It's still causing a lot of staff absence, a lot of pupil absence. As someone who has had COVID 3 times and counting, you know, I am right there with him. And certainly the illnesses I have had since, it's become a running joke. So I really identified with the fact that, you know, schools are spending so much on supply teachers when actually cheaper filtration systems could maybe possibly be the answer as well. I don't know how I feel about those, but I'm a big believer in cracking a window even in the middle of winter, and I think Brent Poland is in agreement with me on that. But have a listen back and see what you make of it.
Well, I'll follow on from that, because I listened to Carl Smith's Friday Morning Break show, which was enticingly called The Attendance Surgery. I thought it was great. He spoke to Gemma Bentley about really what works. That's really what the show was about. There are a lot of tips, and they do really unravel the complexities of non-attendance. You know, they talk about everything from targets and how useful or not targets of attendance are. I thought what was really interesting was a discussion on the tone of communication with parents. And they have a policy in Gemma's school of contacting and speaking. Interestingly, it's speaking, or Oracy again, speaking to parents first. And what they find is that's more effective than perhaps a letter just arriving or some communication. Very interesting show, and good to listen maybe to those 2 shows back to back. John, what about you?
Well, I listened to The Late Show with Lucy and Hannah Wilson, and they were talking about that thing that we've all experienced, I guess, as teachers, but and other people as well, the job interview. When you think about it from that point of view, and as I'm listening to their discussion, I thought, yes, what an odd thing it is, how performative it is, and what the purposes of it, many of its rather cliched elements are there because that's the way you do. You almost, if schools perform the interview because that's the way we do interviews. I liked the very skeptical view of things like tasks that you're given to do. If they are just there to, you know, just to fulfill the sense in which we should give you a task, do that, bears little relation to what you actually are going to experience in your job. I like that. I also like the fact that anyone listening to this who's going to go through teaching interviews in their career should listen to it for the empathy, the understanding, and for a bit of good tips. Very good tip. One I should carry. I'd known this. Judge a school by the biscuits they give you. If the biscuits are bad, don't go there.
That's right. That's what I said that show should have been called, yeah.
Chocolate digestives or a hobnob, you're employed.
Chocolate.
Yeah. Well, there you go. It's not all serious topics here on TTR. We talk about everything. Leanne, what have you been listening to this week?
Mine was the Friday lunchtime show, which is Morgan and Todd's show. It was called Wanderlust and Wisdom, The Journey to Excellent Teaching Communities. Might not seem like it, but the show is angled towards teaching in international schools. And I'm sure at one point or another, teaching the English national curriculum and teaching in English schools, we've all wondered what would it be like to teach abroad. So it was a good discussion of the benefits of it and the hardships as well. So I think if you have that little consideration in your mind, it's a great show to watch.
There's lots of variety on all TTR shows, and it's well worth tuning into them all. You'll learn so much as well as have a good laugh. That's all we've time for this week. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please do let us know in the comments. Thank you very much to our sponsors, John Catt Books and Reading Solutions. And thank you very much to panelists, John Gibbs, Lucy Newberger, and Leanne Lax. Have a great week, everybody. And we see you all, same place, same time, next week. Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.